Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdam, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Let's talk about viruses and vaccines, efficacy, and
CDC?
big government versus little government, and find out who's winning.
Yeah. I wish it was us.
Of course, philosophically, we're winning and we will win. It's just we don't know when. So we win a battle here and there. And I think there's a couple tidbits that we have today that show that the other side is floundering, that they're not doing so well. I'm going to start off with vaccine efficacy. And it's the CDC's actually admitting this, that it's not as efficacious as was thought to be. The U.S. Center of Disease and Control says that right now the efficacy has dipped to 66%, which, well, 2/3, not too bad, 66%. But it's lousy if you are exposing, 34% of the people to something that a lot of people are getting skeptical about.
Yeah.
And I would say there's a few things that we're going to talk about today, and even this, that they might be getting a little bit concerned too, because what we're doing is citing the center for these figures, because they at least pretended it was the efficacy had been up to 91%, so going down to 66%. But they said probably the variant is more difficult. Yeah, maybe it is more difficult, and maybe there's a shortcoming in the logic of saying, well, the virus is changing and shifting, that we'll just keep giving more of the old vaccine, and then they're shocked that it doesn't work. But I don't think that's a sound medical principle that they've followed over the years, that as soon as a vaccine becomes less effective, that they immediately just add on the same drug.
Stuff, yeah.
Maybe the virus is changing, and maybe they have to change their treatment. And we have some evidence here that they might be giving a second thought to some of their pronouncements. Here certainly is an admission that there's something going on here. And you can imagine the people who are in limbo out there. They're worried, they want to do what's right, they know it can be serious, and yet they have a lot of reservations. All of a sudden they start reading this, even when the Center for Disease Control said, it doesn't work as well as we thought.
Yeah.
What do we do now? And they do make a suggestion, which we sort of agree with.
Yeah, you imagine being the people who rushed out and did what they were told, and they got their 2 jabs, and they saluted the flag, and then it turns out, well, it's not that great. Sorry about that. Not even sorry about that. But this continues with what we've been talking about, and really a shout out and thank you to Zero Hedge, who picked up this theme from our show earlier this week, yesterday, which is that the mainstream media is recognizing some of these things that we've been talking about. And actually, if we can put up that first clip, today's main theme is from Bloomberg. Vaccine efficacy diminished as Delta arose, CDC report shows. Remember, Walensky said just a couple of months ago, you're not going to get sick if you get the vax. And then she said, we showed this yesterday, and then she said, well, it doesn't work that great. You're probably going to get sick if you get it. But the question is twofold, really. First of all, they say, okay, well, it's not our fault. Don't blame us. It's because of the Delta variant. Okay, but I'm not a scientist. I know you are, Dr. Paul, but I believe there are variants. They've happened in the past. It's not an unusual thing. Maybe it's not because of the Delta variant. Maybe it's because that's the reason why they've never been able to have a coronavirus vaccine in the past anyway, which, of course, a vaccine to cure the common cold would have been something they wanted. But again, as you say, and this is the biggest question that I don't see why people are asking, if 2 doses of a particular drug does not have an effectiveness on a particular medical problem, why is giving more of that same thing going to do anything differently?
one thing that the individuals involved in this, in public health policy, they had to be in denial. They were never allowed to say, well, this is a tough virus. It can be bad. It's sort of like you can get a pretty bad cold, and if you're not careful, a cold can lead to pneumonia, and people who aren't in good health can get very, very sick if they have a real bad cold. But they don't want to compare that. It's almost like blasphemy that you can't do it, and they're in denial. But just think, if people are searching for an answer, they ought to check and find out if this is over the top, because a lot of people agree with this principle, and that is the COVID-19 is in the category of a cold virus, and that would explain so much of this about the different viruses, and one works for a while and doesn't seem to work. Maybe the virus is changing, and why are they changing their tactics? Just think of if medications were permitted, in a generous manner, as well as understanding this from a cold virus, understanding as a cold virus, and then they'll come up with the statistics. A lot of people died, and I suggested to you, wouldn't it be neat if all these people are reporting these statistics? If there is an event that they warned about, and so many people would die if they had this rally and go to a football game, but they never report when nothing bad happened. And I was thinking that when they say that there's some bad thing happened, they describe an event, and there were 400 people there, then they list how many people became positive over it, not who became sick and died, but just getting positive over it. Why shouldn't a good journalist say, out of those 100 people at that meeting, 99 people didn't get this sick at all. Not put the number down of the people who survived this great danger.
Yeah. Well, you used a word that is so important, I think, just now, blasphemy. It's considered blasphemy to suggest that there are treatments. And that is a great word, I think, because it has become a religion, not even just a political ideology, but a religion. And it's a religion that I think was founded in hysterical anti-Trumpism, and because the whole thing is tied up in blue versus red, blue states versus red states, and it all is tied up into Trump. But imagine what would have happened if early on, now that we know that the vaccine is not doing that great, if early on the CDC, instead of being a one-trick pony, get the vax or not, or that's it, if they had put out a list of recommendations, yes, this is a bad virus, it could really hurt a lot of people in certain categories. Here is a list of 10 things you need to do. A, lose weight. America is very fat. Get some exercise, get some sunlight. Here's a couple of vitamins you can take. No guarantees, but this might help you. Make sure you might want to try some of these drugs that seem to have worked. And if you are in the category of having comorbidities, you should think about isolating yourself and staying away from people. Imagine if they had just put a simple packet together instead of what they've done, which is wall-to-wall propaganda.
Let me just follow up on this blasphemy charge or possibility, because in the old days, and even in current days, there are places in this world still, if you don't follow the religious doctrine, you can be in big trouble. You can lose your life on it. You can be in prison. I mean, just think of, and sometimes we're on the wrong side of those debates. We go in there and stir up trouble like that. But anyway, but today the penalties. So far in this country, even though some people have died from the lockdown, but the penalties are wholesale now if people won't go along with the passport. The passport now has to be dwelled on, and they probably, the people who are promoting that probably aren't as keyed in on just who's going to get better and who doesn't get better, but they are keyed in on, will the passport be the accepted form of controlling the people? And that is what they are, and that's where the rebellion is coming. People are tired of that, and that's why resistance is a proper function in an authoritarian society that's running roughshod over the people.
Yeah. Well, here's something that would have been considered blasphemy really just days ago, and let's put up this next clip because we noticed this in the New York Post. Fauci early use of monoclonal antibodies can cut risk of hospitalization and death up to 85%. This is just yesterday, where we have been told all along there's nothing you can do if you got it except go to the hospital and get a vent. Now he's saying 85%. That sounds almost like it's actually better than the vaccine, right?
Right.
It's a miracle, 85%. And it's bizarre that now he's saying that because, as we know, Governor DeSantis of Florida, who is hated by this administration, he said it a few days ago and was viciously attacked by the AP for pushing nonsense and pushing garbage. And now here we see that Fauci's saying it.
I wonder whether they'll make a plaque for the president for being brave enough to go ahead and do it. And I think he early on admitted it. I don't think he tried to hide it, but we knew that he had taken that. And even back then, it was not as well understood as it is now. But here's a quote from Fauci. Bottom line is, this is a very effective intervention for COVID-19. It is underutilized, and we recommend strongly that we utilize this to its fullest. He's talking about early treatment with the antibodies.
Yeah.
But that is great news, and I think it's. I was comparing it to the hope that you experiment with a new type of vaccine that hadn't been really used before, and compare that to something now that's been developed in the laboratory that you don't have to develop it in human bodies and see,
Yeah.
I wonder how the body is going to respond to this new idea on vaccines.
Yeah.
So and so far, I've had friends and family members that have used the antibody treatment and been very, very happy with that.
Well, what's interesting is, as you suggested earlier, Trump was attacked for all of the things he took when he caught COVID, and including the antibodies. He was attacked viciously, and now Fauci's saying, "Hey, we should have been using this. Why aren't you guys using this?" As if he just sort of woken up and had this idea. Imagine how many potentially thousands of lives could have been saved if at the beginning they said, "We need to look into this. This might be a way to treat people early on, so they won't get so sick." And you do have to wonder, maybe it's just conspiracy-minded people like myself, but you have to wonder if it was held back this whole time because they had one thing in mind: push the vaccine, push those billions of profits into big pharma.
Yeah, and that's why this is so strange. My theory, which is worth what you're going to pay for it, it's just a theory that they're in trouble with their scenario, and they may be preparing it because the truth may get out, and it is sneaking out here and now, and they want to be on the right side of this issue. They'll say, "Oh yeah, we knew that, and that's why we advised this," that sort of thing, because maybe it's going to become very, very apparent that there's more questions with these vaccines. We just quoted the problem and that they're admitting to.
Yeah.
So we're quoting from first their admission and then their suggestion, which is a suggestion that's been around for a long time, especially in the quarters that we deal with. And Dr. McCullough, a physician that I have a lot of respect for, has been talking about this. That's his major thing. And it's interesting that what he said is if people followed what he was saying, 85% of the people wouldn't have to go to the hospital. Where are they now? 85%. If they follow these rules, and McCullough was not. I believe he literally was fired for this. The details I don't know, but here he stuck to it, and yet he was never into it in politics. He got into politics only because somebody heard him give a medical lecture and say, "Hey, we have to spread this around." And all of a sudden, the first time anything got on the internet, he got canceled. That's the attitude there. And now it's being confirmed that he was and is on the right track. So this is, and I think people should. That's what I tell family members and friends. They ought to look into this.
Yeah.
But Fauci does admit, he's speaking correctly, that it's best to deal with that early. But why that frustrates me a bit is the reliability of the test. I saw the other day one example that somebody was double checking, they were questioning it, and they found 8 people that got a test. They were all positive, and somebody else checked them, and none of them were positive.
Yeah.
So that's still a problem. But I think there's enough known about symptoms, and there are tests. I believe some people I know get 3 different ones and see if they all come out the same. But no, you can find out and diagnose it. The point is, you don't wait until they have to go to the hospital. And that was one of the mistakes made early on. The doctors were being denied access to some of these medication, hydroxychloroquine. Look at the fuss and the harm they did with the president by ridiculing him. But so I think it's in better shape now, and now the virus is, even the variant is dying off, and things are getting better. And with this emphasis and willingness to look at early treatment, I think things are going to get better, and hopefully so.
That's going to terrify Pfizer, right? But it says a lot about this grim Soviet-style censorship that Professor Dr. McCullough was banned from all social media for saying something now Fauci said yesterday. It's really, really scary when we can't talk about these things. We can't even talk about it. But I think Americans are waking up, and I think they're starting to think, hang on a second. The CDC just told me this vaccine is not all it was cracked up to be, yet they're also telling me that I could lose my job if I don't get it. People are, this doesn't make sense. But on the point that you just made, actually, about the Delta variant dying off, let's look at the next clip that we have. This is from Zero Hedge, which we turn to a lot, and they talk about an analyst at Morgan Stanley predicting that the wave would peak in 1 to 2 weeks, and that was 10 days ago. And it looks like that is indeed what's happened. And certainly if we go to the next clip, certainly in Texas that is the case. We're seeing the steep decline after a steep incline. Where also, I don't have a clip, but the deaths are far less than last year, as one might expect when you have a variant that, as a lot of people said at the beginning, Dr. Paul, as you know, a lot more easy to catch it, but it's not as deadly, thankfully. So it is dying, and you have to wonder, so what was all the fuss about? It's dying off now. Why was it used as such an excuse for such totalitarian measures against Americans?
Well, if our sense of optimism is justified, these 2 reports may really participate in a change of attitude, a more positive attitude, and give people more hope that this thing is going to end. But we haven't seen any signs of lightening up on the passport.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a different problem. They're dealing with this. Maybe they have to deal with the medical facts, and I think that's what's coming out. But what we need to do is encourage people to keep resisting and understanding why there's no medical benefit, and there certainly is a vicious attack on civil liberties by these vaccine passports. That, to me, is a great danger.
And as we keep saying, this is not us inventing it. Walensky herself, the head of the CDC, says the vaccine can no longer stop transmission of the virus. So how can you require a vaccine passport for the express purpose of halting transmission of the virus if the top dog says that it doesn't halt transmission of the virus? It doesn't make any sense. And let's go to the next clip here. This is Jordan Schachtel, and we publish a lot of his stuff. He's very, very good analyst of this. And this is a bit of a thread, and you can pause and read it if you want. I'll just read the first part. But he says, data out of Israel. We always talk about Israel, Dr. Paul, because it's such an important lab, unfortunately, for the Israelis. But data out of Israel makes it clear that shots 1 and 2 of mRNA is equivalent to taking an old flu shot for a new flu season. Therefore, COVID tyrants can't even pretend this is about health. It's a signal of compliance at this point, a way for the government to justify multi-billion-dollar orders. And Michael Krieger, and there's a couple of other comments I won't read, but Krieger says at the bottom from Liberty Blitz, meanwhile, isn't the booster the exact same shot? They aren't even trying to make sense anymore. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, boy. There were some other things that I wanted to point out on this subject, and this has to do with the cooperation of big business and big government,
Yeah.
the collusion, which I fear. You would think somebody who believes in honest free markets, that you would be overly sympathetic to anybody who's successful. But unfortunately, the great successes in this country financially are usually obtained when you're in bed with the government, either contracts or financially, Federal Reserve or whatever. But here, the government does send out directives. They don't cancel people directly, and they don't censor people directly, but they might talk the companies and social media to do the censoring. But this headline, again, some word from a Zero Hedge, Delta to impose $200 monthly fine on unvaccinated employees.
Wow.
Penalize them, don't look at it for common sense. But the one thing that caught me here, it says Delta Airlines will fine employees who refuse to take the COVID vaccine. $200 a month, and then it'll get worse if you don't behave yourself. But I wanted to quote something that comes from a Bloomberg article. He says that the new policy was outlined in a company memo, the company airline company, from Chief Executive Officer Ed Bastian, who said 75% of the carrier's workers already are vaccinated. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Free market, there might have been half. Who knows?
Yeah.
But they could have done it. This idea that they think they're being prohibited from their freedoms, they're just allowed to make up their own mind.
Yeah.
But then what the opposition wants is they don't want to even give us that much of a choice of us making our own decision about our health. And then in bold letters, this little quote says, increasing cases of coronavirus linked to a very aggressive variant are driving the push for all employees to get the shots. See, behind all this, there's still, this is old history, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just the stuff that we talked about here today should make them have second thoughts.
Yeah.
And the only way you can explain that is this artificial and beneficial relationship between big corporations and the government, the power of the government, and they both benefit. The government gets bigger, they get their directions handed out, they don't get blamed for the bad stuff. The big companies become the bad guys and enforce it, but they also have the benefit of making a lot of money. Pfizer's not complaining about working with the government. I think they're doing okay.
Well, people have been so smug about getting their double vaxes and looking down on people that have decided not to. Well, the news for them is that the double vaxxed is the new unvaxxed. And in fact, look at this next quote, because Israel has been rolling out the third shot, the third booster, now for a while. And this is the Israeli Prime Minister attacking people who got two. He said, quote, people who receive 2 vaccine shots walk around feeling like they are protected. They don't understand the second vaccine has faded against the Delta. They must quickly get vaccinated with the 3rd dose. So people that play by the rules and got that second vaccine said, who do you think you're doing? You better go back and get another one. And it's not going to end at that either.
Well, hopefully this will wake up a few people. They should, and we sense that. But we're so, I guess, we're not so pleased. We're so surprised that we have Fauci saying something. But you know what? Always have to put, what if? What if tomorrow he changes his mind? He'll have to modify this. So that happens frequently. But for now, people should latch on to this information.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do one more on this because it's related to Israel, and it's just a chart, Dr. Paul. If we can put that next one up. I honestly would love to have someone who's in favor of mask mandates, in favor of forced vaccines and passports, explain this chart. And this is from Ian again, and we always look at his charts. They're well sourced. Daily new cases per 1 million, Israel versus Sweden. Cases in Israel are 976% higher than Sweden, despite their reinstated mask mandate and vaccine passport system. But sure, experts keep telling us that masks and vaccine passports are key to getting COVID under control. And you can see Israel is shooting up through the roof, where Sweden is down there at almost zero, virtually zero new cases, and certainly no new deaths unlike Israel.
You know, and a quick follow-up on that is and we do have listeners, both people who are challenging us, and libertarians who have concern about the environment.
Yeah.
And everybody should be concerned about the environment. But if you're seriously concerned, people ought to look up and find out the relationship of the environment with masks and the waste of masks. Of course, we mentioned the medical connection because there's a lot of negatives of what it does, and especially with children and more suicides and all this. But there's also just the disposal of these filthy masks.
Terrible.
And people aren't going to wash them and clean them. Hey, can you imagine those kids? So, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So here's another one of these little if type things. Yeah, United Kingdom, McDonald's runs out of milkshakes amid supply chain chaos. Who would mess up a milkshake? Who did it? And, you know, I say they do everything on purpose, but how evil could you be if you're on purpose making sure nobody can have their milkshake? This is terrible. And it's supply lines. But the point here is the lockdown. You know, the economy is and has been very shaky. The economy was in the midst of starting into a big correction when the COVID came. So there's a lot of things wrong in the economy that you blame on the correction of the malinvestment from the Fed. But the shortages, I don't think that is the case. I think the shortage is a combination, and very much so on this distortion of the employments.
Yeah.
You know, that people don't go to work, and then they get their bailouts and their checks, and people go along and they won't go to work. They get paid more to stay at home.
Yeah.
So this means that they don't have a shortage of milkshakes. They have a shortage of people working. The one that impressed me the other day was 30 or 40 school buses lined up, you know, and they said, no, it's too dangerous, you know.
Nobody wants to work.
Yeah, maybe if they doubled, you have to really increase their salary to compete with the government handouts.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're competing. You know, in free market, that's how labor shifts around. People who are good workers, they get their price, their labor values bid up, and they shift gear. In this case, that's happened, but it's so artificial.
Yeah.
It's the competition is with the government, who gives them more money to do nothing. At the same time, nobody can compete with them, and you end up with shortage. What else would you expect?
Yeah.
And it's actually getting worse, you know. And every day I think you're going to read more about some bottleneck someplace, truck drivers and bus drivers, shipping, and the whole works.
Yeah, well, we wanted to do just a quick update on the story we've been watching, which is Afghanistan. And everyone's talking about it. It's become overly political, but we still have some questions. Let's put up this next link. This is from the Secretary of Defense. He's saying, hey, things, you know, we are working hard out there, and I'm sure they are. They've taken 87,900 people evacuated from Afghanistan since the end of July. That seems like an incredible amount. I didn't realize there were that many Americans over there working. Well, let's look at that next clip. Out of that almost 90,000 they took out, this is Lucas Tomlinson from Fox News, only 4,400 of them were Americans. That's what the Pentagon said. So they took out almost 90,000 people. They're saying, we can't get it done in time. We can't get it done in time. And the State Department, and you're going to talk about this in a second, they don't know what to do. But here we find out that 90,000, only 4,000 of them were Americans. You know,
this is one little tidbit. It's not a tidbit either. One little episode that the American people are going to be very, very upset about. And they're starting to realize this, the priorities that they have. And of course, it was overall, for me, it's the foreign policy. Why in the world do we get ourselves in those holes? And they do not go to the point of trying to disengage from this and work some deals out in how you disengage. No, that's not it, because both sides are aggressive interventionists, and in this case, the Republicans are worse than the Democrats in many ways of keeping the troops there. Of course, the Republicans right now can criticize the Democrats for not being very efficient in solving these problems. And once again, overall, the last 20 years, the only way you could blame Biden for that is being pretty lackadaisical about it and supportive of it when he was a senator. He didn't have much to say about that. But on these numbers, they are astounding. The Americans aren't being taken care of. And it raises one important question for me, is that when people leave their country and go work someplace else, which they should have a right to do, does the Army follow them?
Yeah.
If your businessman takes his business and goes place elsewhere, even if it's for lower taxes, does he get protection? Basically, he does. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation is government insurance that if there's a political event or a military event, that he gets bailed out.
Yeah.
So the principle that we've been following, which is a lousy principle, is that no matter where you go in the world, you're an American citizen and we are never going to desert you. Well, I think diplomatically there's some truth to that, but this whole thing that people go, who knows why all the Americans are there? They're contractors, they're people starting businesses, maybe some people in business with some Afghans, and they've decided they have to leave. Is it our obligation to pay for, I keep thinking of all these immigrants coming in, now the Afghans coming in, our hotel gets closed where we're having a conference up in Virginia, and because they want to use it for communications, with the Afghan thing. So they're up there. They take over the hotel. We have to leave, and they were going to probably fill the hotel, pay for the rent. We've already started paying for the rent of illegals coming in here. We put them up in hotels and everything else. So yes, punish the American people and give whatever they think they need it. I've labeled this when it's hard to understand. Why do they do this? Why do they bring these people in? Why? Well, it's the Soros agenda. I think, for a while, if you read what Soros said about his plans, you say, well, that's no big. He's for an open society. That sounds libertarian.
Sounds good,
open society. Some libertarians really believe in crashing borders and all this. So the open society is something that you should look at. But I don't think he's interested in the open society that libertarians might suggest that we could have. So, but I think the Soros agenda is one world government, and chaos would lead us to that. And once we get this passport in place, we're going to be able to manage people. Who knows? There might be someday somebody will come along and want to manage the size of the population. Could you believe that could happen? So.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a couple of quick clips toward the end. If we can skip forward to the one from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, this one with a football stadium in there. I don't know if, sorry about that, but I'm going to have to skip a few of these slides again. No COVID-19 mandates. If we can skip ahead to that one, to that clip. Yeah, there we go. It's a good news story, Dr. Paul. Georgia, University of Georgia, Stanford Stadium, they said no way. No COVID-19 mandates for the football games, no masks, no vaccines, no nothing. And this is in contrast to LSU, which is, you want to come watch the game, you better show us your vaccine passport. That's terrible news. And the next one really quick too, something out of the UK, the most hysterical country after Australia. Even they removed mask requirements for children at schools, and we can't do it here. Disgusting. Final clip, if we can put that up. And I just want to let people know, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. This is our conference, The War on Us. As I mentioned yesterday, we've had to change the hotel. That is now reflected on the Eventbrite page. I will put a link in the description of this show, and also I'll return the link to the top of ronpaulinstitute.org website, because the good news, Dr. Paul, so many people were turned away when we sold out. We've been able to open up a couple of blocks of tickets. There are now tickets available to purchase to come to this event. New hotel, Hilton, Washington Airport, just down the road from the original one. If you want to see it, get your tickets while you can. we'll probably sell them all out again.
Yeah, you know, if we ever got paranoid, we'd say it was all a conspiracy and they messed up our conference. I've not made that statement.
Some people have.
Yeah, but I think that it's going to backfire. If they did do that, it's going to backfire because right now it looks like we're going to be more energized than ever, and we're going to have a larger crowd, and we're going to have, a conference. It might be our biggest conference ever.
Yeah.
You know, and we've actually, numbers aren't our only goal. We're looking for quality.
Yes.
And we figure, well, we estimate we'll have a small thing and have 100. We didn't realize how many quality people we have, and that's what we'll get. And that's why I was excited about the fact that we can turn this around, be able to get a few more people to come. And but I just think the atmosphere that it's energized me, you know, about what's happened, and we didn't get closed out. But we have to say, the hotel that we were planning to go to, in spite, they were really in the middle of this mess. You know, they were leasing their hotel from the government, and they wanted our business. I believe that. We've been there several years, and they've treated us well. And then we got a little bit nervous about it, you know, about deposits and all that. But the way they closed out, they did it the way they should have. They returned our deposits and all this. But I think they got the worst deal, except for one thing. You know, the worst thing is that if the government's the one that broke the contract, and but that probably won't matter. They might be able to charge more for the rooms than we were willing to pay. But we won't say that.
Well, I'm all done, Dr. Paul, if you want to close
Very
this
good.
out.
I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today, and I think we have some exciting news here because people are coming our way. This thing on United Kingdom's saying that they're going to be more sensible about it. I think this is great, and they want to make more sense about the antibody usage. The whole movement seems to be the accepted when you have Fauci saying, oh yeah, this antibody stuff, just do it early and it's wonderful. I mean, something that is, I think, truth breaking out. But we cannot let our guard down because if nothing else, I haven't heard any backing away with vaccine passports. And so they maybe have to back away from the mask because it's so ridiculous. It's never been proven to prevent illness, and that to me is tragic because there's a lot of people who have a good reputation about knowledge and medicine and all that. Just think you have to do it, but it's more or less they do that on defense and the pressure's put on them. So anyway, I think things are moving in the right directions. We're better off today than we were 1 year ago. More people are informed and more groups are growing. If UK can shift their gear on face masks, anything can happen favorably. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.